Dude, sometimes I find myself wondering, did we stop in time? Because honestly, many recent releases don't seem to have such a big graphical difference when compared to games from over 10 years ago. And what's even more interesting is that some of those older games still manage to surpass a lot of what's being released today. With that in mind, I put together a list of 15 games that prove that even without all the technology we have today, they were already delivering something absolutely surreal for their time. Detroit Become Human is hard to believe this game was running on baseline 2018 hardware, because the facial fidelity Quantic Dream achieved here still makes many next-gen titles look downright embarrassing. The focus on pore level detail, eye moisture, and the micro expressions of each android creates a direct bridge with the player that many modern games fail to build, even with all the processing power available today. When you look closely at Connor's or Kara's face, you're not just seeing a well-applied texture, you're seeing the subtext of the scene reflected in their gaze, a dilation of the pupil or a slight tremble of the lip that conveys the doubt of artificial intelligence. The lighting in each environment is a spectacle in its own right, from the futuristic, sterile apartments to the rainy, decaying streets of Detroit, where every drop of water reacts independently to neon light. What's most impressive is how the game maintains this absurd level of quality in extreme close-ups, without textures looking washed out or the scenery losing geometric definition. It's a masterful work of performance capture and material rendering that shows that when a studio chooses to focus on visual immersion centered on the humanity of its characters, the result is something that ignores the passage of time. It humiliates many of today's releases simply by understanding that the detail in a character's face is what carries the weight of a narrative choice, turning graphics into a tool of pure acting. Quantum Break, Remedy has always been a studio that pushes technological boundaries to their absolute limit. But what they delivered with Quantum Break in 2016 was something truly off the curve. And even today, it feels ahead of its time. The way the game handles time manipulation creates visual distortions that are extremely complex and demanding for hardware to process. Watching the world literally freeze or shatter into thousands of geometric fragments while light and shadows react to these spatial breaks is a spectacle that requires far more than what most modern graphics engines are capable of delivering. The use of advanced volumetric lighting techniques and the level of environmental detail, blending realism with massive particle effects, give the game a blockbuster look that many recent titles can't even come close to replicating. On top of that, the integration between the character models, based on real actors, and the environments is so seamless that the transition into live-action video scenes is almost imperceptible. This is a game that refused to settle for the basics. It simulated complex physical effects of light and matter distortion that make much of today's ray tracing look amateur by comparison. Every temporal explosion is an explosion of technical detail, proving that Remedy was years ahead of its time, delivering a level of visual fidelity that still makes us question whether modern games have really evolved as much as we're led to believe. Rise, Son of Rome. This title was one of the Xbox One's launch games, and if you run it today on a decent display, you'll seriously wonder how this was even possible back then. Crytek leveraged every bit of the CryEngine's DNA to create one of the densest and most visually striking worlds in video game history. The level of detail in the Roman armor is downright insane. You can see the sheen of polished metal, the wear on the leather, and every stitch in the fabric of the capes physically reacting to wind and character movement. This is something many modern RPGs with hundreds of hours of content don't even come close to delivering at this level of quality. The battles have a monumental scale, with hundreds of soldiers on screen, and yet the game maintains a surreal level of animation quality and ground textures, mud, dirt, and blood included. The global illumination and shadow effects in the forests of Britannia create an oppressive, realistic atmosphere that makes you feel the weight of the cold, damp climate. Rise is proof that a focused art direction and a well-optimized graphics engine can create something that ignores the passage of generations.
It wasn't just beautiful for 2013, it remains one of the most visually aggressive games on the market, humiliating current releases that sacrifice visual detail in favor of empty, lifeless open worlds.
Crisis. You can't talk about games that visually humiliate others without mentioning the absolute king that shattered paradigms. In 2007, Crisis wasn't just a game, it was a technical challenge that almost no computer on the planet could truly conquer. What's bizarre, and even a little sad, is that if you look at the density of the vegetation, the way each palm leaf reacts individually to your gunfire, and the solar lighting system cutting through the jungle in a fully volumetric way, it still goes head-to-head with any major release from last year. Crytek implemented physics in almost everything you see in the environment, allowing you to destroy entire huts in an organic, systemic way, something most modern games have simply abandoned in favor of static, non-interactive scenery. The water rendering and depth of field effects were decades ahead of their time, creating an illusion of reality that is still impressive today. It didn't rely on cheap post-processing tricks. It delivered raw, honest visual simulation. Seeing the nanosuit reflect the environment and dust particles floating under the sunlight on the Lingshan Islands is a constant reminder that nearly 2 decades ago, we had already reached a level of realism that the current industry seems to have lost interest in pursuing with the same passion. Gran Turismo 4. If you want to talk about a technical miracle, you need to look at what Polyphony Digital achieved on the PlayStation 2. In 2004, while most games were still struggling to deliver a clean image, Gran Turismo 4 ran at a 1080i resolution, something that felt like science fiction at the time. The level of car modeling is so precise that you can identify aerodynamic curves and the way light reflects off the paint in an almost photorealistic manner, especially considering this was a console with only 32 megabytes of RAM. The game didn't settle for being merely functional. It pursued visual perfection on every track, from the sheen of wet asphalt to the details of packed grandstands. The way car shadows are projected onto the ground and the fidelity of the wheels in motion humiliate many modern racing games, which, despite having millions more polygons, lack the same soul and artistic precision. It's a title that proves how developer talent and deep hardware knowledge can overcome any generational barrier. Watching a race replay in GT4 even today is a disorienting experience, as it delivers a visual clarity that many modern titles try to mask behind blur filters and cheap post-processing effects. Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. The Fox engine, created by Hideo Kojima's team, was one of the most impressive tools ever developed, and the Phantom Pain is the final testament to its power. What this game does with global illumination and material rendering puts many current releases to shame. The terrain of Afghanistan and the jungles of Africa react to sunlight in such a natural way that you can almost feel the heat and dryness of the environment. The level of detail in Snake's uniform, which becomes dynamically covered in blood, mud, and dust, shows a degree of care that most studios simply ignore nowadays. The fluidity of the animations is another point that humiliates the competition. The transition between crawling, running, and entering combat is so seamless that the game feels like a constant action film. And the most bizarre part? It runs with flawless performance even on more modest machines, delivering image sharpness and draw distance that many modern open-world games can't maintain without severe frame drops. It's proof that optimization and smart art direction are worth far more than brute hardware power.
Battlefield 1, when DICE released Battlefield 1, it raised the bar for visual fidelity in World War I to a level the franchise itself has never managed to surpass since. The use of photogrammetry, basically scanning real-world objects directly into the game, created mud, rock, and debris textures that are disturbingly realistic. Watching rain mix with the earth as a tank advances, dynamically destroying the environment, is a spectacle of particles and physical effects that humiliates almost everything released in recent years. The volumetric lighting, with sun rays cutting through explosion smoke and the fog of the trenches, creates a heavy, cinematic atmosphere that transports you straight to the battlefield. Each weapon features an absurd level of mechanical detail, with metal surfaces accurately reflecting the surrounding environment. It's a game that doesn't sacrifice scale for quality. You get massive maps with 64 players, and yet every corner of the environment feels handcrafted, with a level of technical care that today seems to have been replaced by automated, generic procedures. Batman: Arkham Knight. This game was released in 2015, and if you told me it came out just last week for current generation consoles, I'd believe it without blinking. Rocksteady created a Gotham City that is an absolute visual triumph. The way rain streams down Batman's leather cape and pools on the metallic surfaces of the Batmobile, reflecting the city's neon lights, is something many modern games with ray tracing still can't replicate with the same natural feel. The density of detail in the streets, with steam rising from manholes, trash blowing in the wind, and atmospheric lighting that gives depth to every alley, creates an immersion that feels almost tangible. The facial animations during dialogue and the fluidity of combat, where you can see every muscle and armor plate reacting to impact, show a level of polish that borders on obsession. Arkham Knight humiliates recent releases not just through technical prowess, but through a cohesive art direction that understands how to use light and textures to forge an unbeatable visual identity. It's a painful reminder that we had already reached the peak of visual fidelity nearly a decade ago, and that many studios seem to have forgotten how to get there. Max Payne 3. In 2012, Rockstar Vancouver delivered a level of technical detail that the industry, for the most part, simply gave up on pursuing. What happens in Max Payne 3 is a masterclass in physics and material rendering. Every bullet fired has real physical interaction with both the environment and enemy bodies. Blood stains clothing dynamically, sweat soaks Max's shirt as the action heats up, and the scenery breaks apart with a precision that humiliates any modern shooter. Max's procedural animation, where he braces a hand against the ground or walls to balance himself during slow-motion dives, adds a sense of weight you hardly find in any other action game. It's not just about polygon counts, it's about how the world reacts to the character. Watching shards of glass fly and dust particles respond to the light in the favelas of Sao Paulo creates an atmosphere so dense you can almost feel the stifling heat. This is a game that doesn't rely on tricks to look good. It uses pure engineering to ensure that every gunfight is a unique and visceral visual spectacle. Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. Looking out toward the horizon in Black Flag and seeing the line where the sea merges with the sky is still one of the most beautiful experiences open-world games have ever delivered. What Ubisoft achieved with water rendering and weather effects in this 2013 title is something many modern pirate-themed games don't even attempt to replicate. The way the ocean shifts in color and behavior from a calm turquoise blue to a deep raging gray during storms is a triumph of art direction. Volumetric lighting cutting through the foliage of tropical islands and the detailed port towns create an absurdly immersive sense of place. But what truly humiliates the competition are the smoke and particle effects during naval battles. When the cannons fire, thick white smoke blankets the deck, reacting to sunlight and flames. It's a game that understands that visual beauty comes from scale and atmosphere, delivering a Caribbean that still feels more alive and technically impressive than many generic open worlds released in the past year.
A bike ride along Vespucci Beach?
It's easy to take GTA 5 for granted after so many re-releases, but if you stop to analyze its draw distance and global illumination, the sheer scale of what Rockstar achieved is staggering. The world of Los Santos is a miracle of optimization and detail. The way city lights glow in the distance when you're flying over the hills at night, or the heat haze distorting the air on desert roads, are details that many modern games simply ignore to save processing power. The ragdoll physics system and the way vehicles interact with the terrain are still superior to almost everything we see in the genre. Every traffic light, every reflection in rain puddles, and the seamless transition from the ocean floor to the mountain peaks showcase a level of polish that borders on obsession. GTA 5 humiliates current releases because it isn't just pretty, it's a complex visual ecosystem that maintains consistency at a massive scale, proving that well-executed design can keep a game at the top for more than a decade without losing graphical relevance. Dead Space 2. Space horror has never been as visually intimidating as it is in Dead Space 2. Visceral Games used lighting and shadows not just as an aesthetic choice, but as a design tool, one that still surpasses most modern horror games. The level of detail in Isaac Clarke's armor, with mechanical parts moving independently and neon lights reflecting off worn metal, is something you can admire up close without seeing a single blurry texture. The dynamic dismemberment effects and the physics of bodies floating in zero gravity are executed with the technical precision that gives real weight to the game's violence. What truly places this title on a higher tier is the visual clarity and art direction of the space stations. The environments feel real, functional, and claustrophobic. The way emergency lights flicker, revealing and concealing threats in the shadows, creates a visual depth that many games today try to imitate with dark filters, but without the same technical mastery of contrast and particles that this 2011 classic delivered flawlessly. BioShock Infinite. The floating city of Columbia is, without a doubt, one of the greatest triumphs of art direction in the industry's history. In 2013, Irrational Games delivered global illumination and a use of color that still makes many open-world games today look gray and lifeless. What allows BioShock Infinite to humiliate modern releases is its ability to create a world that feels like a moving painting. The way sunlight breaks through the clouds and reflects off white marble monuments, combined with the density of particles and the constant motion of the city in the sky, creates a visual depth that doesn't rely on brute force, but on impeccable aesthetics. The level of detail in Elizabeth, with facial animations that convey genuine emotion and a gaze that always seems focused on what matters, is something many modern games with larger budgets fail to replicate. It's a game that understands that graphical beauty comes from cohesion. Every sign, every shadow, and every water effect in Columbia exists to build an atmosphere that defies time. It remains a visual feast, proving that artistic style, when well executed, is eternal. LA Noire. What Rockstar and Team Bondi achieved with motion scan technology in 2011 was so far ahead of its time that, in many ways, the industry still hasn't caught up. The fidelity of facial animations in LA Noire is so high that you can read a character's intentions simply by watching a subtle nervous tick or eye movement. And this isn't just aesthetic detail, it's the core gameplay mechanic.
Seeing wrinkles form on a suspect's forehead or a lip tremble during an interrogation humiliates almost every modern game that relies on generic procedural animations. On top of that, the recreation of 1947 Los Angeles is superb. Noir-style lighting, sunlight reflecting off chrome-plated classic cars, and the texture of period clothing give the game a look that feels like an old photograph brought to life. It's a technological milestone that sacrificed everything to deliver the purest form of human realism possible, and the result is a visual experience that still makes us ask why this technology never became the absolute standard for narrative-driven games. Uncharted 3, Drake's Deception, Naughty Dog has always been a master at pulling the impossible out of Sony's hardware. And what they achieved on the PlayStation 3 with Uncharted 3 is an engineering miracle. If you look at the GRAPHICALLY desert sequence, the rendering of the sand and the way sunlight interacts with each grain and with Nathan Drake's footprints is something that still outclasses many modern games running on cutting-edge graphics cards. The level of detail and the contextual animations, such as Drake bracing himself against walls differently depending on his fatigue, and the water, fire, and smoke effects are polished to a degree that borders on unbelievable for a 2011 console. The cinematic scale of every scenario, from the castles in France to the ship graveyard, is delivered with a sharpness and a color palette so rich that the game completely ignores the passage of time. Uncharted 3 humiliates modern competition by being unafraid to be both grand and detailed at the same time, proving that a talented team can create visuals that feel impossible even within the hardware limitations of its era. Looking at these games is a reality check. They show that graphical evolution isn't just about having more polygons or the most expensive technology of the moment, but about care, optimization, and an art direction that knows exactly where to focus its effort. Seeing games from 10 or 15 years ago go head-to-head with releases that cost $70 today makes you wonder whether the industry isn't getting lazy, relying too heavily on automated tools and forgetting the handcrafted touch those classics had. What's that game you play today and think, damn, how is this still better looking than last week's release? Drop its name in the comments and let's debate these technical miracles that refuse to age.